Greetings, divine, all blessed, peace and love, joy and prosperity. Welcome, welcome. I greet and welcome each and every one of you individually and collectively. Please forgive me for my tardiness. There's a lot going on, but all is truly and indeed a blessing. We are now sitting live and always in archive at your leisure and convenience with the DivinePrince, Pan-African spiritualist, practitioner, author, and advisor, Elagun Oloye Hoodoo Obea Bokur, sharing with you in all things spiritual, mystical, metaphysical, cosmic, evolutionary, revolutionary, healing, and holistic from a Pan-African Voodoo world spiritualist perspective. Understanding that all is truly and indeed a blessing if you can just see beyond the veils. It's an illusion and a test, and one of the greatest divine mysteries of this life cycle. This is my constant prayer, my mantra, affirmation, reverberation, reiteration, and my personal ever-living reality. It is crucial to the very foundation of my inner standing, my teaching, my walk, my works along this divine, all blessed life path and journey. It is how I, the DivinePrince, make sense out of all that we're challenged with here in our daily existence on Mother, Father, Earth. And it is my personal place of power and inner standing, that place from where I begin, the place from where I realize and crystallize all my endeavors, understanding that I, as I alone, create and co-create my divine destiny, and I alone create and co-create my divine, all blessed reality. And so it is. Ashe, Asheo, Ashe. I want to talk just a little bit today about history, revolution, and then, of course, bring that into the present moment in time space, for I am indeed a result-oriented practitioner. And so if it has no effect, spiritual power has its effect, its power, its effectiveness in this present moment in time space. It is our ability to manifest that, not only in our demonstration, but to manifest that in real world time. When we seek healing, when we seek clarity, when we seek prosperity, when we seek health, when we seek abundance, when we seek security and a sense of foundation, we seek to realize those things in the present moment in time space. The story that I want to pull from is about Igbo Landing. Some of you might be familiar with the story of Igbo Landing, for indeed there are many stories of and about Igbo Landing. But the Igbos, if you will, the Igbo, depending on how you spell it, how you pronounce it, the Igbo Landing is the name of one of the most colorful and enduring tales in Georgia's rich literary history, better known as the myth of the flying Africans. Some say flying slaves, but I say flying Africans. This narrative has been told and embellished for 200 years in the U.S. in the form of local legends, children's stories, movies, novels, and television shows. Based on an actual historical event, this remarkable tale of an Igbo, also spelled I-G-B-O or I-B-O or E-B-O, Igbo, slave rebellion on St. Simon's Island has become a powerful metaphor of African-American courage, longing, and conviction. The historical roots of the flying African legend can be traced back to the spring of 1803, when a group of Igbo slaves arrived in Savannah after enduring the nightmare of the Middle Passage. The Igbo in what is now Nigeria and Central West Africa were renowned throughout the American South for being fiercely independent and unwilling to tolerate the humiliation of chattel slavery. The Igbo, who became known as the Flying Africans, were purchased at the slave market in Savannah by agents working on behalf of John Cooper and Thomas Spalding. Loaded aboard a small vessel, the Igbo were confined below deck for the trip down the coast to St. Simon's. During the course of the journey, however, the Igbo rose up in rebellion against the white agents who jumped overboard and were drowned. What happened next is a striking example of the ways in which Africans in America, African slaves, and white slave masters interpreted history in strikingly different realities. One of the only contemporary written accounts of the event of Igbo Landing was Roswell King, a white overseer on the nearby plantation of Pierce Butler. King recounted that as soon as the Igbo landed on St. Simon's Island, they took to the swamp, committing suicide by walking into Dunbar Creek. From King's perspective, the salient feature of the story was the loss of a substantial financial investment for Cooper and Spalding, the slave catchers, the slave owners. What's also important about the story in his telling that these escaped slaves ran or took to the swamp is that this would have been a common telling, not only in Georgia, but in all of Gullah Geechee territory, and certainly Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama coastal bayou swampy lands. It was commonly known back then that slaves would so-called, as this man has tried to say, would commit suicide or would commit themselves to the swamp. They believed that there was no life there. They believed that there was no survival there. They had no understanding that not only were we able to survive in the swamp, but we had then developed a relationship with the inhabitants of the swamp, the native indigenous peoples who were already here. It is one of the main reasons why we honor and acknowledge and mask Indian on Mardi Gras every year, to acknowledge the relationship between these escaping slaves, these rebelling, revolutionary enslaved people, and the relationship with the inhabitants of these swamps, of these wilderness areas, of these wastelands, as they were viewed in the oppressor's eyes. It honors that relationship. It was a common belief that a slave who took to the swamp was lost inventory, was a lost property. And of course, they did not want to perpetuate the idea that we had any sense of independence, autonomy, freedom, survival. They wanted the remaining enslaved to believe that you only found death if you took to the swamp. So this telling at Simon's Island, St. Simon's Island, is very important in the story of revolutionary activity in the Americas. We hear stories of Nanny of Maroon. We hear stories of Maroons south of the border. We often do not talk about retail or hear stories of revolutionary acts here in North America because of the oppressive nature of white supremacy and enslavement. That telling was not told. That telling was downplayed. It not completely rewritten and lied about altogether. So the story of Igbo Landing will be various depending on the purpose, the ethnicity, the motivation of the author in telling the story. African American oral tradition has preserved a very different account of the events that transpired that day. As with all oral history, the facts of the story have evolved as storytellers elaborated the tales over the years, such as there are now dozens of variations on the original episode. In the late 1830s, more than 100 years after the Igbo uprising on St. Simon's, members of the Federal Writers Project collected oral stories in the Sea Islands. This is Gullah Geechee territory, many of which can now be found in a project called Drums and Shadows. Drums and Shadows, Survival Stories Among the Georgia Coastal Negroes. An older African-American man by the name of Wallace Quartermain was asked if he heard the story of Igbo's Landing. Quartermain replied, "Ain't you heard about them?" Well, at that time, Mr. Blue, he was the overseer. And Mr. Blue, he go down one morning with a long whip for to whip them good. Anyway, he whipped them good and they got together and struck that hole in the field and then rose up in the sky and turned themselves into buzzards and flew right back to Africa. Everybody knows about them. This account of transforming the hardships of slavery into the magical powers of freedom and flight has been retold by a distinguished array of African American artists throughout the last century. Virginia Hamilton and Julius Lester rendered the tale for children. Julia Dash, very popular rendition, celebrated the memory of Igbo Landing in the eloquent visual interpretation in her film Daughters of the Dust, which was produced in 1991. Perhaps most important, Nobel Prize winning writer Toni Morrison used the myth of the Flying Africans as the basis for her novel Song of Solomon, written in 1977. I also think it's important to note the correlation with the flying African and the concept of the concept of the flying. I don't want to use the word witch because it's often interpreted in English as witch, and I'm having a brain freeze right now on. I'm pulling up my my Yoruba, but I'm thinking of Iyami, and I'm thinking of the idea of that power that is attributed to women in Nigerian philosophy, in Nigerian Ifa religious concept, and then the idea of flying as is associated with the Igbo Landing telling. And though in the Igbo Landing telling, we're seeing enslaved Africans, male and female, flying, disappearing into the sky, taking to the sky, taking flight, as it is recorded in documented history. We also can compare that to the telling of Iyami in Ifa, Yoruba, and other West African, more traditional spiritual culture. The idea of freedom from physicality, the idea of escape from the laws of nature, escape from the laws of carnality and material and form. We talked about the pentagram in a previous show and its representation of not only basic earth law, earth, water, fire, air, but then the fifth element being mind, being ether, being the realm of spirit. Now in quantum metaphysical thought, we might even contribute black matter to that realm of existence. That space that is unmeasurable, unseeable, but according to science holds more value than anything material that we can conceive. I've been saying for years at the beginning of my radio broadcast that the spirit realm is more real, more tangible more advantageous than anything in the material realm that we can lock our loyalties onto. There's a biblical scripture about setting up your treasures in heaven versus earth, versus that which is corruptible, taking on the uncorruptible. And so it's about transformation of that which is physical into that which is spiritual, but it's also about that which already exists within the spirit realm. All power, all energy was created in the universe at once. Science says at the event of the Big Bang, but all power, all energy was created at once. And then through the course of nature, through the course of movement, through the course of cyclical cycles, seasonal change and evolution, we now have the manifestation that we perceive, that we see, and then perceive in our eye and in our eye's mind. So the idea of not only the slave, the enslaved African, finding power in the midst of any circumstance, in the midst of any kind of abuse, in the midst of any sort of bondage, and then finding freedom. Whether you believe that story or not, whether you understand that story to be a literal telling, or maybe a metaphysical telling or spiritual telling, is not really important in the spirit realm. Understanding that all things have their root, their power, their endurance in the spirit realm. So the idea that we can take anything, and I like to use a magical term, prosperate. To prosperate is to move through something, not over it, not go around it, not to avoid it, not to find a softer way at something, but to move directly through something, to confront something head on in order to transform it into life, in order to transform it into something that is in your best interest, in order to transform it into something that is powerful, useful, and creative. So I find peace and solace and empowerment in the telling and the stories of Igbo Landing, in the ability of our ancestors in any circumstance to find empowerment, to find freedom, to find a use for that which they already knew. If we could count in Yoruba, if we could count in Akan, if we could count in Fan, then the enforced entrapment into the Middle Passage does not then afford us to forget that, to lose that knowledge. We might now be forced to count in Portuguese. We might now be forced to count in Spanish. We might now be forced to count in English. But it doesn't mean that we lose that ability to count. And if we can remember that ability to count, then we can remember our rhythms, we can remember our sacred codes. And with those codes, we can invoke power. The power of Mami Wata, the power of Yemaya, the power of Oshun, the power of Oba, the power of Oya, the power of all of our great mothers, the power of Iyami, the power of our ancestors. For indeed, it lies within us. It's in your DNA code. It's in Jacob's ladder. It's already woven into the fabric of our lives. If we don't acknowledge it, if we don't activate it, if we don't give it space to grow, if we don't feed it, just like the muscles of your body, just like your mind, just like the young mind, just like the old mind, if you don't keep it stimulated, if you don't feed it, it ceases to grow. It ceases to evolve. It ceases to change. We've got to move. We've got to fly, especially now in 2019, going into 2020. We've got to remember how to fly down. We're confronted with many statistics. We're confronted with many circumstances. We're confronted with many judgments and many blocks and many ill will and ill-intentioned spirits on the planet at this time. So we must remember how to fly above all things, anything. We must remember how to transform. There are stories, there are legends of not only flying and flying Africans, but transforming Africans and Africans who were able to communicate and speak with nature, able to communicate and speak with lions and birds and reptiles and elephants, but also take on form. And we see this in many West African cultures, West African traditions, but we also then see it showing up in what we now call wives' tales and what we now call nursery rhymes and limericks from the West here in the mix, the gumbo pot of this culture. And so much of our tradition, particularly our oral tradition, is now masked behind other stories, other traditions, and other forms of math. Once you understand the math, you can speak any language. Once you understand the math, you can speak any language. Once you truly understand the inner workings, when we look at the cosmos, when we look at the body, the microcosm mirrors the macrocosm, and the macrocosm mirrors the microcosm. We view the macrocosm as all things visible, all things physical, all things out here that we can see and measure and comprehend and talk about and discuss. And we see the microcosm as the smaller realm of understanding, the molecules, the atoms, the smaller reality. Another way of looking at it is the ant has one viewpoint of the earth in reality, and the elephant has a completely different reality. And they might not see each other clearly. They might not realize, that they share a space at any given moment. And so we too, and particularly as gods and goddesses, inhabiting a physical reality, inhabiting a clay vessel, we too have the ability to see things on a macrocosmic level, but also on a microcosmic level. And sometimes we get what we call tunnel vision, where you focus on what you think you know and what you think you understand. And there's a common saying that in doing the same thing over and over and getting the same result while expecting a different result is insanity. And so we must change our view of our dimensional space. We inhabit 11 dimensional spaces just to make this one reality whole, just to make this one reality solid. Space, length, width, time, many levels of dimensional reality and understanding. So some will only see the dot, some will only see the part, some will only see the particle, some will only see what they can focus in on, what they can understand and comprehend, while others will capture a wider range of information. And it's that wider range of information that's the doorway, the gateway into our God consciousness, into accessing that spirit. Often for the human, we must be under duress. We must be challenged in order to conjure up that place. And learning to conjure up that place without being under duress, without being challenged. Another way of looking at that is many people turn to God, religion, philosophy, self-healing when they're under duress, when they're in pain, when they're challenged, when you're really concerned about what you don't have and what you feel that you need. And often when we are in our material comforts, our physical comforts, our carnal comforts, food, luxury, clothing, jewelry, our homes, our cars, we then suspend spiritual awareness. That then now goes into a separate dimension. Another way of looking at it is a Sunday Christian who shows up at church on Sunday, who shows up at church on Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas, the major church holidays, but it's not there for study. It's not there for choir rehearsal. It's not there for the meat of the work. And that is dimensional space, interdimensional space, intra-dimensional space. INTRA means that which is within a thing. Interdimensional space is how these separate realities interact, link up with each other at any given space and time. So I exist in a reality of voodoo. Many of you have heard me say this before. Many of you have heard me share this. My reality is voodoo. Please do not be confused about it. I am a voodoo practitioner, a voodoo priest, adherent to voodoo 24 hours a day. That's my vocation. But just like you, I've got to eat. I've got to pay water bill. I've got to pay light bill, electricity. I've got to pay for my internet. And so I work and I have a job. And my job is performance, culture performance, acting, commercials, movies. Some of you already know this. This is not about bragging. This is about clarifying the spiritual point that I'm trying to demonstrate. I am blessed that in that I can be myself most of the time. Most of the time. Because let's be clear, when you're at work, you have rules, protocols. You know, your job might have a no smoking policy. Your job might not allow you to go and get coffee, you know, at your leisure, but only in your break time. I personally am grateful and humbled to have a job that I can still be myself. I can be various aspects of myself. And we all have various aspects of ourselves. Some of you are disconnected from some of the various aspects of yourself. Some of you are only Black during February, Black History Month. Some of you are only Black, you know, when it comes time to discuss politics. Are you Black when you're buying groceries, when you're shopping for gym shoes, when you're buying luxury cars, when you're purchasing products that are not manufactured by Black people, that don't support Black people, that don't send any money back into the Black community? We're talking about intra-dimensional space. So you obviously would have had the enslaved African who felt trapped, who felt bound in Igbo Landing, who felt, you know, what's the point of talking about freedom? I have clients and godchildren who are in prison. I have some who are post-incarcerated, who've been out of prison 10, 15, 20, 30 years. But I often hear them talk about there's a sense of being bound, locked up, chained away. That's one form of reality, and has all the distress and the pain and the anguish of being separated from your loved ones, and separated from freedom, and separated from fresh air and green grass. But then there's a sense of freedom that a person can find in study, in reading, in learning, in exercise, in meditation, in focusing their mind on something else, something more positive, something more enduring, a greater reality. Again, we create and recreate our reality by what we think, by what we think. What you see is a direct product of what you think and what you understand. Some of you just see feathers and maybe some blurry, blinkily stuff. Others see sequence and see design and see lines. Some of you see history, see a story, see something being told. Okay, so it's about inter and intra-dimensional space. I love the story of Igbo Landing and the idea that our ancestors had it out. had, and the idea that our ancestors did not all feel limited to what was presented. Another important part of the story surrounding Igbo Landing and the greater environment of the South and enslaved America is the idea of revolution and uprising. This story is greatly influenced by uprising and the idea that the enslaved would seek freedom through uprising, through violence, through killing massa, through burning down plantation. And it was a very scary environment for these white slave owners at that time, as people like Nat Turner, as stories like Igbo Landing, to use a modern word, leaked out into the greater society, into the greater community, and indeed into the African, to the enslaved community. But there are numerous revolutionary events, slave uprisings that occurred during that time. We can look at 1526, San Miguel de Guadalupe, Spanish Florida. So we're talking about Gullah Geechee territory, Florida, Georgia, maybe Alabama. 1548 to 1558, 1579 to 1582, Biennial Wars, Panama, New Spain. This was a suppressed slave uprising. The San Miguel de Guadalupe, 1526, Spanish Florida uprising was victorious. In 1570, Gaspar Yanga's revolt, Veracruz, New Spain, was a victorious slave uprising. 1712, New York slave revolt, British Providence of New York was suppressed in New York in 1712. In 1730, the first Maroon War, British Jamaica was victorious. And that's one of the reasons why we hear more telling of Nanny of Maroons and some of the Southern, South American and Central American slave uprisings, because we wanted to elevate success. We wanted to elevate those who won. We wanted to elevate those who keep winning. And so I want you to Google, because I'm not going to, bore you with a lot of text and detail. I want you to Google Igbo Landing, or look that up on Wikipedia. And you'll find that there were numerous slave uprisings that had taken place, that were being documented, that caused great fear and anxiety among these slave-owning people, but also among the slaves themselves. Again, the slave that felt bound, that felt there was no option, that felt that there was no life beyond the life that they knew, also felt anxiety with these uprisings, because they knew that their families would be torn apart. They knew that the politics would still affect them. If you escaped, if I escaped, your remaining family would be brutalized. Your remaining family would have to suffer the consequences and the new regulations and the new level of brutality that the slave owners would then manifest if they lost cargo. I say cargo because to them we were cargo, we were property, we were inventory, we were a loss of financial wealth and income to them. They did not see us, identify us as a loss of humanity. And we thus took on that energy. We don't humanize ourselves. We don't humanize each other. We don't empathize. We only see politics. We only see race. We only see color. We only see Democrat and Republican. We only see Black nationalists. We only see house nigger and field nigger. We don't humanize ourselves. We're still operating as cargo. We're still operating as property. And that self-awareness then is projected outwardly. So we then identify by how much we have, how much we make, how much did it cost, whose name and whose brand is on it. It's still a continuation of the enslaved mind. It's still a continuation of the slave market. It's still a continuation of the dehumanizing of a people, and particularly our people. Today, in 2019, in today's media, in today's pop culture, we're seeing arguments and controversy about products, about shoes and handbags with blackface on it. Some of us want to exist in a reality, in an illusion of a reality of post-racial America. Others want to exist, want to live in a reality of a consistent white supremacist reality in America. And when we talk about dimensional spaces, all of these realities are real within their dimensional space. There are relative realities, and then there are absolute realities. The absolute reality was slavery was the law of the land. The absolute reality was if you were black, if you were brown, you were at risk of being enslaved, free or not. You were at risk of your life and the life of your family. Another relative truth was we could move around. We had maroon culture. We had uprisings. We had those who fought against. We have those who still continue today to fly. I'm doing everything short of that song. I don't want to invoke that song. I don't want to invoke that God. But we've got to regain our ability to fly, regain our ability to transform in any circumstance. Sometimes, as the critic, you get locked into a negative mode and you're picking apart the media. I have a good friend who does that every day, all day on Twitter. It's all about enslavement. It's all about white supremacy. It's all about politics. It's all about, the disastrous relationship between the police in some cases and the community. And there's never any light. There's never any answers. There's never any resolution. There's never any revolution, in that there are powerful young men and women who are making a change, who are being vetted by dozens of universities, who are being vetted by dozens of corporations, who desire their knowledge, their skill, their power, their mathematics. And if we don't love our power, our skill, our mathematics, it will continue to be appropriated. It will continue to be commercialized. It will continue to be bastardized. It will continue to be used for the benefit and the adventures of others, both financially as well as entertainment, as well as archaeologically, as well as academically, for the benefit of others and not ourselves. If we allow ourselves to continue to operate in that domain, in that reality, we have a choice. Today, I choose to operate in the reality of self-empowerment. Today, I choose to operate in the reality that I can do all things. I am because my creators are, irregardless of the judgment, the circumstances, what you say, what you think, what you believe I may be able to do or not do, or should not do. I am God, and I am indeed goddess, and so too are you. I am God and goddess. I am. because my creators are. And so the idea that our ancestors found flight, found freedom, found a use of math and science in a time when it was said, when it was believed that we had no conscience, we had no soul, we had nothing that the white man didn't give us. That was the belief. And some of you still believe that. Black and white, some of you still believe that. Some of you are still operating in that. And that is why you are operating in insanity. And you're getting the same result, doing the same thing with the same beliefs, getting the same result, repeating the same experience, repeating the same lessons over and over again. Because this life, this dimensional space is not necessarily a playground. It can be a playground based on your view and your vision, but it's a classroom. It's a classroom. It's about regaining your God conscious, your goddess conscious, becoming God again, while still managing to navigate Earth law. Earth law. Gravity is an Earth law. We've managed flight, but gravity is an absolute Earth law. The relative reality is that we can use our math, use our science to empower ourselves and to empower others around us to grow, to heal, to develop, to expand your brand, to expand your career, to use your creative powers and skills that are divinely innate and inherent to create the life, to create the reality that you seek, that you desire, that is indeed your destiny. It is not your destiny to suffer. It is not your destiny to struggle. It is not your destiny to be in constant flight. It is not your destiny to be in constant battle. You have to breathe. You have to reflect. Even a war general has to breathe, has to reflect, has to refresh, has to eat, has to have water, has to have sleep, has to have a life, has to have a family, has to have downtime. And it's in that time that we focus in on our inner reality. It's when we're up and running that we often don't stop to connect the dots between what we're doing every day, how we're operating every day, and the energy that we're encountering. That is the job of the empath. That is the job of the spiritualist, to help you to distinguish it, to make sense of that. I say almost every day, I'm not going to just come on and talk, but I certainly do appreciate you being present with me when I'm on my rant or I'm sharing truth. I'm humbled and honored by you. I'm grateful for those of you who don't care how many teeth I have in my mouth, who don't care how much hair is on my head, who don't care how much hair is on my face, who don't care how much jewelry I have on or don't have on. I am grateful for you. I often say that I have the most powerful, the most educated, the most enlightened, the most erudite audience in YouTube. Gods and goddesses share this space. The creators and co-creators of the universe share this squared circle with us. And I'm honored and grateful for you and your continued support and your continued love. I'm always receiving your requests 24 hours a day, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to be present for you and with you in this moment in time. I welcome your questions, your comments, your requests. Please do type your questions for me in the chat in capital letters so that I don't have to keep reaching for my glasses to separate them from the remaining conversation. I greet each and every one of you for being present. Ms. Poetry in Motion, Ashton Marie, Quentin 601, I, Gabby, Emma's daughter, The Boy, Tisha, Twiley, Inyanga Yu, did I miss anybody? Ujo Wajet, Seven the Gentleman, You all are so consistent. You all are so powerful. And I appreciate you. And I welcome you. I welcome you. I welcome your ashe. I welcome your energy to this shared village, to this shared community, to this shared church that is House of the Divine Prince, Thai Posted and Hoodoo Central. Indeed, this is Hoodoo Central. Don't be fooled by any imposters. Don't be fooled by any perpetrators. And I know that you aren't. I know that there are imposters and perpetrators because my watchdogs and my pit bulls keep me up to date on the happenings. So I appreciate you and I'm grateful for you. And I'm here for each and every one of you. This is what I do. This is who I am 24 hours a day. Some of you have come to New Orleans. Some of you know me in New Orleans. Some of you have run into me in the street, run into me in the French Quarter. You know that I keep it 100. You know that this is me every day, 24 hours a day. It doesn't matter what the weather is. The spirit is what's most real. It's what's most real. And I am, because my creators are all powerful, open, and receptive to all that operates for my good right here and right now in this present moment in time space. I'm going to quickly end the show, or I should say momentarily, I'm going to end the show. Unless you have questions, comments, requests that I might have missed in the chat. I never want to be here just to hear the sound of my own voice. I never want to be here just for your entertainment. I want this to be a space of empowerment, a space of enlightenment, a space of truth. All is truly and indeed a blessing. Until next time, I will see you forward. Ashe.